I slept with my bestie last night, she said, sipping her wine with a smug smile. I slid a $100,000 check across the table and said, "Consider this your love bill." She had no idea that the calm man sitting opposite her had been plotting her downfall for months. What happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about betrayal, money, and revenge. My name is Tom Amass. I live in Chicago, Illinois, and I'm a financial analyst. Numbers are my world and control is my comfort. I've always believed in planning and seeing several steps ahead before making a move. My father went bankrupt when I was young because he trusted blindly, and I swore I'd never let the same thing happen to me. I thought I had it all: a modern apartment with glass walls that gave a panoramic view of the city, a steady income, a reputation among colleagues as a calm, reliable man, and a wife who I believed loved me. But life has a way of peeling back the layers, revealing truths you never expected, and I was about to learn that lesson the hardest way. It was late evening, the city lights glowing through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our living room. Rain tapped against the glass, a rhythmic reminder that sometimes storms come quietly before the chaos. She walked in, heels clicking against the hardwood, a sound I had once associated with warmth and home. But tonight, her calm demeanor was off, unsettling. Her dark eyes held a strange stillness, like she was about to deliver a verdict. I sensed it before she even spoke. "I slept with my bestie last night," she said, her voice casual, as if stating the weather instead of tearing apart the life we had built together. My heart froze for a split second, an instinctive shock. Then, almost automatically, I smiled. Not a smile of relief or joy or reconciliation, but one of quiet calculation. I reached into my jacket pocket and slid a check across the coffee table toward her. $100,000. She blinked. Her eyes widened, disbelief mixing with confusion. What is this?" she stammered. I leaned back slightly, letting the weight of the gesture settle, letting her panic simmer. "This is your love bill," I said calmly, almost mockingly. "Every lie, every betrayal, every sleepless night, everything has a cost. Consider this payment in advance." For a moment she just stared, frozen, the words failing her. I remembered all the times she had laughed at my seriousness, brushed off my advice, or quietly undermined my authority when no one was looking. I remembered her subtle manipulation at work, the little schemes she pulled to elevate her friend while she disparaged me behind my back. And I realized something then: betrayal is a currency, and tonight I was cashing in. Her lips trembled. For the first time I saw fear, not the fake, performative kind, but the raw, unguarded panic of someone realizing they had underestimated me. And somewhere deep inside, a part of me relished it. Not because I wanted to hurt her for the sake of revenge, but because after months of deceit, I finally had control, and control had always been my sanctuary. I watched as her fingers hovered over the check, unsure whether to snatch it away or let it lie there as a silent indictment. My mind flicked back to the first time I had felt powerless. My father pleading with creditors while I could do nothing, the helplessness etched into my memory. I swore then that I would never allow myself to be blindsided again. Tonight, that lesson was being reaffirmed in the most personal way imaginable. Outside, the rain intensified, streaking down the windows in chaotic rivulets, a visual echo of the storm about to unfold inside our lives. And in that quiet, charged moment, I knew this was only the beginning. She finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly, though she tried to hide it behind indignation. "You can't just, what are you doing?" Her hands hovered over the check, unsure whether to snatch it away or leave it where it lay like a trap. I leaned back, watching her, letting the silence stretch between us like a taut wire. There's a unique kind of power in stillness. The storm outside had become a soft roar now, the rain drumming against the glass like anxious spectators waiting for the next act. "I'm doing exactly what needs to be done," I said evenly. "You want to know why? Because betrayal is a currency and you just cashed in." I could see her blinking rapidly, the fight in her eyes warring with the realization that this wasn't about money, it was about control. And she had lost it. I remembered the first time I noticed the subtle cracks in her loyalty. It was a few years ago at a small office party. She had been whispering to her best friend, glancing at me with a smirk that never reached her eyes. At the time I dismissed it. I wanted to believe in love, in trust. But the memory replayed now like a warning etched into my mind. Trust isn't given, it's earned, and she had spent years gambling with mine. She swallowed, finally daring to speak. "You think you can just control everything? This check doesn't mean anything." Her voice cracked on the last word and I leaned forward, my gaze steady. "It means everything. Every lie, every betrayal, every hidden night with your friend, it all has a cost. And tonight I decide the terms. Her best friend. The thought alone made my blood boil briefly before I forced calm over it. That woman had always been a subtle saboteur, planting ideas, whispering half-truths and smiling when my wife fell for them. I remembered the time they had convinced her to manipulate a project at work, sabotaging a colleague I had been mentoring. The fact that history had repeated itself in my personal life was bitter, but predictable. Some patterns repeat until someone stops them, and I was finally ready to stop them. I don't need this, she said, finally picking up the check. The shaking in her hands betrayed her composure, but she tried to mask it with a forced glare. I let her struggle with it, knowing the humiliation, the unease, the realization of being exposed. It was all part of the plan. For a moment we both sat in silence. I could see the internal calculation in her eyes, fear, anger, and the faintest hint of something that looked like regret. She didn't understand me. She never did. And that was the final leverage, the advantage of patience, the power of knowing your enemy better than they know themselves. Outside, the city lights of Chicago blurred through the streaked glass, a reminder of how small we are against the world, yet how much control we can exert over the pieces we choose to touch. And in that moment, I realized that tonight, the first moves of a much larger game had been set. Please don't forget to subscribe. After that night, life returned to a strange kind of normal. She acted as if nothing had happened, wearing the mask of domestic routine while I watched from the shadows, calculating my next moves. I pretended to be absorbed in work, in spreadsheets and market reports, but behind the lines of numbers I was gathering evidence. Every text she sent, every subtle attempt to hide her tracks I recorded. Every GPS ping from her phone, every suspicious message between her and her friend, I archived meticulously. It felt clinical, like assembling pieces of a puzzle but with higher stakes. This wasn't just data, it was survival. I remembered a lesson my father had forced into me after his bankruptcy. Numbers don't lie, he said, his voice gravelly from years of regret. People do. Track both and you control the truth. I had carried that lesson into my career, but now it became personal. Betrayal, I realized, is predictable when you know the patterns. And I had memorized hers. She would come home late, claiming work deadlines. She had always been ambitious, always craving attention, but ambition without ethics is a dangerous thing. The subtle manipulation she learned from her best friend had once helped her win a promotion, but now, it was just another tool she wielded against me. And I watched, letting her reveal herself in ways she thought were hidden. One night, I found a lipstick-stained napkin tucked behind a pile of magazines. It was small, almost laughable, but to me it was confirmation. I remembered another memory. Years ago in college I had fallen for a woman who lied with the same ease, the same charm. I had loved her blindly, and the heartbreak had scarred me, teaching me patience, teaching me how to watch before acting. Now that patience was my weapon. I began preparing subtle traps. A casual dinner invitation to mutual friends where I'd drop hints of trust and loyalty, small mentions of financial responsibility and hidden costs. A gala where I would carefully craft introductions, hinting at improprieties without saying a word outright. Each event, each gesture, was calculated to make her second-guess, to make her panic silently. I wanted her to feel the consequences of her choices without a single word of accusation from me. She noticed the attention, of course. The slight pauses, the questions in her eyes, the defensiveness that crept into casual conversation. I let it slide, offering a neutral smile, feigning ignorance while the net slowly tightened around her and her friend. The thrill of control was intoxicating, not cruel for cruelty's sake but because after months of betrayal I finally had power again. I also remembered the first time I had confronted a betrayal at work, early in my career. A colleague had embezzled funds, and I had uncovered it quietly, letting them falter while I documented every step. The principle was the same. People expose themselves when they think you don't see them. All I had to do was watch and wait. And so, my life became a careful performance. Calm on the surface, ruthless beneath. Every smile she offered, every feigned apology I catalogued. Every late night, every suspicious text I noted. Outside, the Chicago skyline glittered under rain-soaked lights, oblivious to the storm brewing inside the apartment. I knew this was only the beginning, that the next moves had to be executed with precision. Please don't forget subscribe. The gala was downtown, a sleek, glass-encased tower overlooking the Chicago River. I arrived early, slipping past the valet with a sense of quiet anticipation, dressed in a tailored navy suit, my reflection catching in the lobby's polished marble. The room was alive with chatter, the clinking of glasses, and soft jazz that seemed to wrap the event in an air of sophistication. She would arrive soon, her heels echoing like a warning, her friend by her side. Tonight, the chessboard was set and I was ready to make the first strategic moves. When they walked in, I felt the familiar mix of calm and calculation. My wife wore her signature charm like armor, laughing easily, radiating the confidence she had always used to manipulate situations. Her best friend trailed slightly behind, scanning the room with predatory precision. Both were unaware that tonight I wasn't a passive observer. I was the invisible hand shaping the narrative. I approached, greeting them with a measured warmth. "Tom, I didn't expect you here," she said, her smile tight as if sensing something off. I nodded, letting her words hang. "Just thought I'd see how everyone's doing." Casual, unremarkable. Yet beneath that veneer, I could see the questions forming in her mind. Why was I calm? Why was I smiling? I began subtly dropping hints, weaving a web of implications without ever speaking a direct accusation. At one point, I gestured toward her and her friend in front of a cluster of colleagues. "You two have always been such a clever team," I said lightly, letting my eyes linger in a way that suggested complicity, and then almost imperceptibly I added, "I admire people who know how to manage risks." My voice was smooth, polite, yet sharp, a blade hidden in silk. I noticed the small changes immediately, the way she shifted her weight, how her friend's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, how both of them avoided eye contact with anyone I intentionally engaged. It was subtle, but it was enough. Panic, I realized, could be a quiet thing, creeping in like a shadow before it swallows its prey. As the night unfolded, I watched them navigate the room, subtly isolating them without ever appearing confrontational. I introduced them as partners in a private venture, letting colleagues overhear in passing, planting seeds of doubt, curiosity, and suspicion. Every gesture, every word, was designed to expose cracks in their composure. I remembered my mentor's words from years ago. The true power in a confrontation isn't in shouting, it's in patience and observation. Let people reveal themselves while you remain unshakable. Tonight, I was executing that principle flawlessly. The years of betrayal, the manipulation, the nights I had spent questioning everything, it all led to this. Later, in a quiet corner, I observed her friend fidgeting, a hand brushing a strand of hair nervously, eyes darting to me repeatedly. My wife's forced laughter clung to her lips, but her eyes betrayed her. Fear, awareness, and the realization that she was no longer in control. I let them stew in it, knowing that the ripple of anxiety I planted tonight would follow them long after the gala lights dimmed. The Chicago skyline glittered behind the floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting the chaos of the city and the quiet storm I had unleashed within our lives. Tonight, the first domino had fallen, and the game had only just begun. The morning after the gala, the apartment felt quieter than usual. She had left early, claiming meetings and errands, leaving behind a faint trace of perfume in the air, an invisible signature of her presence. I walked past the living room table, where the check still lay like a reminder of the confrontation we'd survived, and sat at my desk. I opened my laptop and prepared a new wire transfer. $50,000, routed to an offshore account I had long ago set up for contingencies. I labeled it "penalty for breaches of trust" in my own private ledger, a tiny symbolic act that made me feel the cold satisfaction of justice. I remembered another betrayal from years ago, early in my career. A colleague had attempted to undermine me, using charm and lies to manipulate a project I had been leading. I had tracked everything, waited for the perfect moment, and exposed them quietly, leaving no doubt and no escape. Tonight the lesson was the same. Betrayal has a price. People can lie, manipulate, and scheme all they want, but eventually actions catch up. When she returned, I watched her from the kitchen doorway. She didn't notice the tension in my posture or the faint smile that lingered on my lips. She assumed life was back to normal, that her carefully curated deception was still hidden. She had always underestimated me. I had learned to read her like a ledger. Her guilt and fear were written plainly in subtle expressions, gestures, even the way she carried herself. "Tom," she said, feigning cheerfulness, "you're early." Her voice carried a forced lightness. I nodded. "Business?" I said simply. Her eyes flicked to the laptop screen, and for a split second I thought I saw the recognition of what had just happened. The transfer, the message, the cost, but she quickly masked it. She tried to reclaim control with words, small manipulations, accusations disguised as jokes. But I countered quietly, calmly, letting every act of hers reveal more than she intended. Each subtle panic, each careful smile, each deflection, it all became part of the evidence I collected. The power now belonged to me. I was no longer reacting. I was directing, choreographing a response to every betrayal, every lie, every misstep. The Chicago skyline glimmered in the distance through the rain-specked windows, reflecting a city of motion, chaos, and hidden deals. In that reflection, I saw the pattern of her deception mirrored back at me, and I realized the story had shifted. She was no longer in charge. Every move I made, every observation I logged, was bringing me closer to the ultimate reveal. I watched her sit across the room, unaware that each breath, each word, and each glance was being catalogued and considered. My mind drifted to my father's words about trust and patience. He had always said, "It's not the storm that breaks you, it's how you navigate it." Tonight, I navigated calmly, with strategy, and a quiet intensity that even she could not comprehend. By the time night fell, I had laid the groundwork. Subtle hints, small manipulations, and financial consequences were just the beginning. The real reckoning was coming, the moment where everything would surface and the game would finally reveal itself. And I knew, with perfect clarity, that she would never see it coming until it was too late. Don't forget to subscribe. I decided to host a friend's dinner a few nights later, selecting our apartment as the venue. The room glowed warmly from overhead lighting, soft jazz playing, candles flickering on the dining table. Everything was arranged to appear casual, intimate, inviting enough to feel normal, but charged with undercurrents only I could control. I invited mutual friends, colleagues, and acquaintances, making sure she and her best friend would feel observed. As the evening unfolded, I positioned myself strategically, letting casual conversation flow while dropping subtle hints, remarks about trust, offhand comments on people who manipulate situations, and the quiet way I praised loyalty and integrity. She laughed nervously at a joke, but I could see the tension behind her eyes. Her friend, the mastermind behind years of manipulation, glanced around repeatedly, sensing the invisible trap tightening. I remembered a memory from college, the first time I caught a friend betraying another in a group project. At the time, I had done nothing, fearing confrontation. The shame of inaction had haunted me for years. Tonight, that memory fueled me. Every move was deliberate. Every word, every glance, every toast had purpose. Halfway through the dinner, I excused myself to the kitchen, checking the messages I had secretly set to forward from her phone. A text from her friend made me smirk. "He's acting weird. Be careful." Perfect. The fear was growing, subtle but undeniable. I returned to the table, greeting them with warmth, a casual smile, letting the anxiety fester silently. By dessert, the subtle panic was visible. She fidgeted in her chair, the way she held her wine glass tight, the forced lightness in her laughter. Her friend attempted to cover, interjecting with overly cheerful anecdotes, but I could see the cracks, glimpses of guilt, nervousness, the realization that control had shifted. The first seeds of public humiliation were planted, and they would blossom quietly among the guests. Days later, she confronted me privately in the apartment, the city lights blurred outside the window. Her composure cracked as she pleaded, her voice low, desperate. "Tom, please, we can fix this. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I remained calm, letting her words hang in the air. Patience had always been my greatest weapon. "You can't fix what you've broken," I said gently yet firmly. "Actions have consequences, and tonight you're finally feeling them." Her tears were real, unguarded. I remembered my first heartbreak, the raw, aching pain of betrayal by someone I trusted blindly. That pain had forged me, teaching me patience, observation, and strategic response. I would not allow my life to be defined by impulsive retaliation. I let her leave, her steps heavy, muttering a quiet threat I didn't fear. Weeks later, I orchestrated the ultimate reveal. I invited both her and her friend to a business meeting downtown, framing it as a casual networking opportunity. The room was sleek, modern, cold, intentionally intimidating. I presented evidence, not loud accusations, not drama, but calm, irrefutable proof of every lie, every secret, every betrayal. Contracts, messages, location data, even financial transactions meticulously documented. Her panic was immediate. Her friend fumbled, the polished veneer slipping away. I watched silently, letting the weight of exposure do the work. It was surgical, deliberate, and effective. They realized finally that I had been observing, cataloging, and preparing. The power had shifted irreversibly. The fallout was swift. She moved out of the apartment, leaving behind personal items, mementos, and illusions of control. Friends and colleagues distanced themselves, whispers following in our wake. I walked the rain-slick streets of Chicago at night, alone, reflecting on trust, betrayal, and patience. The city's lights shimmered in puddles, distorted, yet beautiful, like life itself, imperfect, unpredictable, and unrelenting. A message buzzed on my phone, anonymous, hinting at her next scheme. I smiled faintly. Some games never truly end, they just evolve. Sitting in my apartment, looking at the skyline, I realized the truth. Betrayal leaves scars, but it also teaches lessons. Some wounds heal quietly, others echo forever. And one thing is certain, I will never be blindsided again. Across the room, an unopened envelope sat on my desk, marked only with a cryptic symbol. A teaser, perhaps, for the next chapter. The storm had passed, but the calm that followed was just another beginning. Please subscribe for more interesting stories.